I mean, who knows what's going to happen in the top 5, top 10 of this draft? Chad, we did the mock top 10. We unveiled this yesterday. But just to recap, how confident are you? Because we filled these out, I believe, on Tuesday. Mm-hmm. Maybe it was Monday evening. Tuesday. And
Tuesday morning for me.
I'm questioning myself as I look at this 2 days later with even the top 3 of the order, where I have Caleb Williams, Drake May, and Jaden Daniels going top 3, plus J.J. McCarthy in a trade. We have the Raiders trading up, the Vikings trading up, and the Chargers going with Marvin Harrison Jr., although several of these teams with rumors galore today as to which player they could actually take. How do you feel about your top 5?
I mean, I feel pretty good about it. You and I have the same top 5, just in a different order with Harrison Jr. and J.J. McCarthy on our board. I mean, I feel as good as I can about it. J.C. Latham seems to be the hot name now that everyone, when you look at the betting markets, there seems to be some intel about him going very high in this draft. That's been the big change today. But, I mean, look, there's always that big-time surprise of a team you're not expecting. Everyone's expecting the Vikings to trade up at some point and draft their quarterback. But who's going to be that big surprise into the top 10 to come up and get someone? That's what I'm watching for tonight.
Here's 6 through 10 for us, and it's changed in the betting markets as well in this grouping, where I had Malik Neighbors to the Giants, Joe Alt. Sometimes the easiest choice is the right choice. That's perfect for Tennessee. Roma Dunze makes a lot of sense for New York if they were to trade up a couple of spots to get ahead of Chicago, who I had taking Byron Murphy, the first defensive player in this draft, and then Dallas Turner still ending up with Atlanta, where he's been mocked quite a bit. Here's what's changed, though, Chad. Offensive tackles are now being mocked quite a bit in the top 10. I don't see Brock Bowers, for instance, in Daniel Jeremiah's top 10, which surprised me. 3 offensive tackles are in his top 10 mock, which he released yesterday. I like your selection at 10 to the Jets. Bowers makes a ton of sense, and so does Dallas Turner to Chicago.
I got plus 700, I think, for Brock Bowers. Sorry. That was plus 270. I think I got it through FanDuel. Brock Bowers, number 10 overall, the Jets. I love that situation and that fit for Bowers to be there with Aaron Rodgers. Right now, it is plus 550 for no defensive players to go in the top 10. So I've got Dallas Turner going 9th to the Bears. Hutton, you've got Byron Murphy going 10th to Atlanta.
Yep.
In your mock draft. So we think it's going to happen. But with those offensive tackles and the run at that position, and some other teams, if they trade up, they're trading up to get an offensive player, a quarterback or a tackle or a wide receiver. I could see a scenario where you have the top 10 picks go off the board and not a single defensive player is taken.
So a lot of the betting odds shifted quite a bit. Davey was telling us in a big way earlier today. Daniel Jeremiah has a scouting background with the new general manager with the Los Angeles Chargers. And in his mock, he has at number 5 overall out of Alabama, J.C. Latham to the Chargers. Now, in other mocks, they have Harbaugh going with the tackle, just being Joe Alt. Joe Alt is also available at this selection in his mock, but they went with J.C. Latham, who the Titans could also end up taking at number 7. But if Latham ends up in the top 5, we know Joe Alt is going in the top 10. What about Fashanu? Could he end up going to Chicago? I think in large part, many of the quote-unquote experts, the draftniks, the insiders, they don't have 3 tackles in the top 10. That would be the big shakeup. And to me, the draft really starts at number 3 overall, the New England Patriots. Because we get the sense, and you can lock it down. I would love to see the odds of first 2 picks being quarterbacks.
So you feel great about Jaden Daniels being the guy at number 2?
Jaden Daniels or Drake May. I just think they're going quarterback.
Yeah. See, I think it starts at 2 just with that either or scenario. Because the odds are way in favor of Jaden Daniels being the guy at number 2. But I believe Drake May is very much a possibility there as well.
Well, and I do too, just based on the amount of time they spent with him.
And he would be a surprise to most if he were the pick.
To Washington?
To Washington, yes.
Well, the thing is, though, that I think the Patriots start this draft because there will be plenty of teams giving them a call depending on which quarterback is available. We expect McCarthy to be available. Drake May or Jaden Daniels will be available. And knowing that, the assumption has been that the Patriots will just take the third quarterback there. But they have a new general manager. They have a new head coach, new department of scouting, and it's not just Bill Belichick making that pick. And I think because of that, maybe they lean towards, okay, let's hypothetically say Minnesota wants to move up. Maybe they're okay with Michael Penix Jr., for instance, and they want to move back and feel like they can pick up Michael Penix Jr. Down the line at pick 11. Again, hypothetically. Then you have the trades start to roll off, and that affects this draft in the first round because maybe New England picks up Minnesota's extra first-round pick in this draft. Right now, there's Washington, Arizona, and Minnesota that have multiple picks in the first round. There could be a lot of movement with those teams. And New England, not knowing the direction they're going to take the franchise, maybe they want to load up on future picks and rebuild, so to speak. Maybe they want a specific quarterback to pair with Jacoby Brissett as they start the season. Don't know. But it's not necessarily just Arizona that could trade back. And maybe J.J. McCarthy goes 3 overall. He's in play. And he would be in play because Minnesota could be moving up to get him. The Raiders, they've been calling Washington, trying to make sure they could get Jaden Daniels. What if Jaden Daniels is available at 3? That all of a sudden the Las Vegas Raiders have locked up their future and put future draft picks with Jaden Daniels to get to New England's spot. Chad, beyond that, then things start to slot together, and we see the run on offensive tackle, we see the run on wide receiver, and then the fourth quarterback. Who jumps into the top 10 to try to chase that? Is it Denver, Minnesota, the Raiders? Could we see a surprise team want to move up and draft their future quarterback? We saw that with Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. Maybe the Los Angeles Rams want to get a backup option this year for Matthew Stafford and make sure they lock up their future at quarterback with Sean McVay. A lot of things are on the table, and I think if Arizona trades back, they have enough of the draft capital, enough of the arsenal to move back up and go chase a wide receiver. I think there's going to be a lot of movement tonight. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. Looking forward to talking about it during our draft special here with OutKick. I'm fascinated at quarterback, obviously, for a lot of reasons. But I think we look top to bottom, Hutton. We know that 2 of these guys are probably going to turn out to be franchise guys, and the others are not. And how teams view them, and then how teams view that pick in the top 5. I think the Patriots are an interesting example of this. For a new coach and pairing up a quarterback with a new coach, it sounds perfect, right, to do that. I also think that if you're Gerard Mayo and you're talking about this longer rebuilding plan, it almost starts your clock a year later as a coach if you decide to trade back, not go for one of these quarterbacks this year, and load up on current and future picks and build around it and wait a year.
But you could still get your
for
quarterback. You could hypothetically still end up with Penix Jr. at 11.
Could.
If you're trading with Minnesota, you'd still have the 11th pick.
Could.
Because you'd swap picks plus gain more, and you can get more in what is a very top-heavy draft. Top 100 picks are critical if you want those guys to make an impact this year, according to the scouts. And honestly, I think what's been overlooked and what does get over, there's a lot of talk about bad football teams this time of year.
Yeah.
Because of the top 10. And what's fresh and unique is we're not talking about the Browns, the Texans. Jacksonville's not drafting up there right now. There are some teams that we're not used to seeing. New England at 3. Or, the Giants and Jets are both in the top 10. Normally there's one, not both. You have Chicago with 2 picks in the top 10 that can change things after they've traded their quarterback. I also look at the bottom half of this first round and the difference that a first-round pick can make for a true Super Bowl contender. Dallas did not have any room to work with their cap. They did nothing in free agency, nothing. And they end up going after the 24th selection in this draft that needs to be an impactful player, most likely on their offensive line. You have Baltimore or Buffalo that needs to move around and get a wide receiver.
So I've got them trading up to 8.
Okay.
In my mock draft.
The Miami Dolphins have a pick below the 20s currently. Kansas City's always going to have the 31st or 32nd pick. But as you begin to look at the second half, Cincinnati with pick 18, Minnesota should be with 2 first-round picks. We have to mention them and how they can shape their team. But how about Dallas, Buffalo, and then Detroit? Detroit right now in most mocks have Kool-Aid McKinstry. And where does Brock Bowers end up? I think there's plenty of talent in the second part of the first round that's been overlooked, especially on defense, that could end up being a difference maker for one of these teams in the postseason in a little under a year from now, that we'll look back on and say, man, that was a great pick. That was a value pick in a draft that was all about quarterback and wide receiver. Here's a corner coming up with a massive play in a big moment, first rounder that's in man coverage against one of the top wide receivers, against Stephon Diggs and C.J. Stroud. If you're Baltimore, just say, like, I think that a lot of the focus has been offense up in a offensive heavy draft. The premium picks for a non-defensive draft are the best players, and those dudes will make a huge impact.
Well, I think of it like Over the Top with Sylvester Stallone.
Yep.
Had the hat, and then he would turn it around backwards, right? And then he would slam someone in the arm wrestling competition. This is the backwards hat for these teams, these great teams. This is the level up that will get them over the hump. So when I'm looking at back half of the draft, we're talking about good teams either in the playoffs or close to it, and a lot of them that won playoff games. Detroit, Philadelphia, you mentioned Dallas trying to get over the hump also. All these teams you're talking about, Hutton, Baltimore, I look at them and think, you got a chance now to bring in the right guy. And it doesn't have to be what you would think of as an impact position that touches the football. I mean, it could be a defensive tackle. It could be a corner. It could be an edge rusher. But someone who can come in and be that backwards hat that Sly Stallone puts on and slams the competition. That's the opportunity you have in the back half of the draft that I'm always curious to see, because these are teams that usually don't need a lot, but they need something. Unless you're the Kansas City Chiefs and you just won a Super Bowl, every team needs something right now. That's the only team you can say they're good because they're the defending champs and they won it all last year. Everyone else is looking to catch them and looking to add that piece that will get them over the top. I'll be watching for that in this draft. Who do they view as the guy that's going to put them over the top? For all these teams that are drafting late, that are playoff teams, are right there to be a playoff spot.
Chad, speaking of the playoffs, the Washington Huskies made the college football playoff.
They did?
Behind the arm of Michael Penix Jr., the lefty. And speaking of just teams and where franchises are headed, I know you were high on Washington and high on Michael Penix Jr. before the season even started last college football season. Where are you right now on Penix Jr. and where he could end up and the impact he makes at the next level?
Well, I'm certainly not jumping off the bandwagon now. Michael Penix Jr. is my guy. Hutton said it. He's right. He's been my guy since the start of the season. I love Washington coming into the year and going back to their win against Michigan State early in the year, where I got to see a lot of that game, and I see Michael Penix Jr. completing throws deep down the field like it's a long handoff with his pinpoint accuracy. I've been a huge Michael Penix Jr. guy, and I think he might end up being the best quarterback in this draft, quite frankly. Could. When you look at drafts in the past, and this is why quarterback and drafting a quarterback is such an inexact science, like it is at any position, but especially at quarterback. I feel confident in saying, even with possibly the first 4 overall picks being quarterback, and none of those 4 picks being Michael Penix Jr., there's likely to be 1, maybe 2, true franchise-defining quarterbacks in this class. That's it. And when I say franchise quarterback, I'm talking about someone you win because of and that you don't just win with because they're there. That's someone that you can go into a season with and you're going to steal some games because that guy is so good. That's a franchise quarterback. When you go throughout history, and just to talk about the inexact science, Jamarcus Russell was the greatest physical specimen of a quarterback prospect ever. Go back and play the tape. when he was coming out of LSU. This guy had 2 winning seasons as the starter at LSU. He was 6'6", 260 pounds, and ran a 4.8 40, which is very fast for a guy that size. He had a huge arm. Physically, he was impenetrable. There was nothing you could say bad about that guy. The Raiders fell in love with the physical traits of Jamarcus Russell. Turned out to be one of the biggest busts of all time. The draft that included Andrew Luck and Robert Griffin III. Sometimes it's about fit and the franchise you go to. Andrew Luck went to the perfect place. He went to Indy. They had 1 year off from Peyton Manning to him. They get the number 1 overall pick. He's in a solid organization and has a good career, albeit a short one, and that's because he wanted to get out because of the injuries at that point. Speaking of injuries, Robert Griffin III, who I just mentioned, goes to Washington, sets rookie records in year 1. Looks like he's going to be the next franchise quarterback. Has that knee injury, year 2, misses the year, comes back. He was probably forced back too quickly because Shanahan was in trouble, and he gets into a battle with Kirk Cousins. He loses out, and then he's never the same guy from that point on. There are so many factors for these guys to keep in mind. It's not just talent. It's not just how they handle adversity. Ryan Leaf versus Peyton Manning is the classic example. Everyone agreed and probably still agrees. Ryan Leaf would tell you this. Ryan Leaf was the better physical quarterback. He had better physical traits than Peyton Manning. Stronger arm. Was bigger. People fell in love with him. And what happened? The guy couldn't handle adversity when he got to the league. And he went to a bad place. And he bickered with his GM once he got there. Peyton Manning went to a place where he could break a single-season interception record in year 1, and Bill Polian had his back the whole time. And they supported him. And Peyton Manning is a dog. No one knew that about him. They saw him lose to Florida in college, but the kid hadn't faced a lot of adversity in his life. You never know until you get to that point where you face true adversity, what you're made of. He handled it fine, went on to a Hall of Fame career. We know all about Peyton Manning. Point being, if you're trying to put a laser pointer on who is going to be the quarterback in this draft, it is so difficult. I'm not going to pretend to sit here and be able to do that, but let me give you a quick sales pitch for Michael Penix Jr. The kid has faced adversity before. He's been injured twice. The last time was 2 years ago. The biggest knock on him is he can't stay healthy. He's been healthy now for 2 years. The number 1 trait of NFL quarterbacks, well, there's probably 2 that are tied. Quick processing, decision-making, and accuracy. This dude's one of the most accurate passers I've seen in the history of college football. You know who else agrees with me on this? Another former Washington Husky quarterback, Warren Moon, will tell everyone about this and how impressed he is with him. Could be a comp for Michael Penix Jr. also. I love the kid. We've seen him handle adversity. We've seen the accuracy. Hutton, if I'm putting money on anyone, just the full picture of what could happen here. And that includes what team drafts him. I hope it's Sean Payton in Denver, but I don't know that it's going to be them. But if you drop a little bit in the draft, you end up going to a better franchise. What if it's the Rams and Sean McVay, and he's the heir apparent to Matthew Stafford? Lots of possibilities, Hutton, but I love Michael Penix Jr. I've been on the bandwagon for a long time. I'm not hopping off now.
And right now, Denver with the 12th selection in this. Is it just the injury history in the background, or is it the style? Is it the pocket presence instead of the other system that so many teams are running right now with what we would see with Drake May or Jaden Daniels or Caleb Williams for that matter at the top? Because, I mean, when I say I don't see J.J. McCarthy throwing bombs to Justin Jefferson, I can see Michael Penix Jr. doing that in Minnesota.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think he's a little bit older than some of these guys, too, because he's been around a while. That could be part of it.
And so was Hooker last year.
Yeah, I think the injury history has something to do with it. He's 23, so that's older than a lot of these guys we're talking about.
And Hendon Hooker was 25?
24 or 25. I think maybe 24.
About to turn, what, 25 by the season.
Yeah. So I don't know. I love everything about him. He ran like a 4.6 something or 4.5 something.
Yeah.
When he ran the 40, so he is fast. He can run if he needs. Not that that's a big quality of an NFL quarterback. I love the guy. Now, I love him more than Caleb Williams. I think Drake May is intriguing as a prospect because of the size and the athletic ability. But I'm willing to bet that Michael Penix Jr. will be one of the franchise guys. If there's going to be two out of this quarterback class, I'm putting my money on Michael Penix Jr., and he's someone that I know right now will not go in the top 5.
Well, and if Minnesota, Chad, if they trade up to go any rookie quarterback that ends up with the Vikings, look at their depth chart on offense. They're set up to have success right out of the gate with an offensive-minded head coach, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison. They have an offensive line that's bookended by Brian O'Neill and Christian Darrisaw. You have T.J. Hawkinson at tight end. Beyond, you have N'Keal Harry's one of their backups. He was a starter in New England that played like a backup. Jalen Naylor, Trent Sherfield. I mean, they have depth at receiver. And right now you'd be competing with Sam Darnold. You know, much like if you go to New England, you're in there with Jacoby Brissett, but who are you throwing it to, right?
Well, and that's what I mean by
Minnesota sets up the rookie to look great.
Yes.
Meanwhile, at the top of the draft, Caleb Williams, while he's got a great receiver in Chicago, he's with an organization that's always just tends to draft wrong or hasn't been able to do enough through free agency to get enough home runs for their rookie or their second and third year quarterback. And then you have Washington, who, I mean, you're waiting to see if they can actually get it right with a defensive-minded head coach and Dan Quinn and new ownership.
Well, and that's what I mean by situation. You know, so often it comes down to just going to the right organization. I mean, Tom Brady with the Patriots.
But you can hit.
And where he went in the draft so late, and the team that was already there.
But, Houston last year.
Aaron Rodgers sitting behind Brett Favre and how that worked out.
Yeah.
Jordan Love possibly sitting behind Aaron Rodgers and how that's going to work out for him.
But then you look at Houston, they're traditionally, annually, they are, they're a top 5 pick. And then they hit with the quarterback, and it transforms the talent around him. And in this case, I think the talent in Minnesota transforms the rookie. You mentioned the project that Drake May could be. I think Drake May comes along fast in a system like that.
It's also C.J. Stroud to me is a great example of how it's such a crapshoot because he goes to what had been a bad organization, and he's running an offense that's totally different than what he ran at Ohio State. And for a lot of these guys now going from college to NFL, they're huddling for the first time in a long time or maybe ever. Yep. We know about that. We're not going to explain the whole the hash marks are different. You're playing more in a telephone booth. Your accuracy has to be better. Your processing has to be quicker. And that can be too much for a lot of young NFL quarterbacks. And C.J. Stroud was a guy who played in more of a wide open offense that didn't huddle. And he goes to the Texans and he's lights out in year one. And I like C.J. Stroud coming out of the draft. We interviewed him in Vegas, the Super Bowl, and loved getting a chance to talk to him. I didn't know that he was going to be that good that quick, and no one knew the Texans were going to be that good in year one in DeMeco Ryans. Perfect example of how it's an inexact science, but I can tell you it's all about, at times, where you end up. Now, you got to do something with it if you're a quarterback. Minnesota is the great example, Hutton, that you bring up. It's why I hope they stick and pick Michael Penix Jr., because I think he would thrive with that supporting cast in that organization if he got there. I don't think they are. I'm buying into the hype and the reports about their love of J.J. McCarthy, and they're probably going to trade up and draft him. But I think if they stayed where they are and draft Michael Penix Jr., that's a great spot for them and Penix.
Well, and McCarthy is another good example of Minnesota's offense, because you have a run game, too, with Aaron Jones, who they bring in from Green Bay.
Yep.
So they are stacked, and they're a quarterback ready away from really hitting it. And they do it without bringing back Kirk Cousins and the money. They're trying to do it with the rookie quarterback. And, what about the rumors that they could trade Justin Jefferson? I'm not buying it. That's why you move up. That's why you trade up to go get the rookie to pair with your star wide receiver, the best in the league. Meanwhile, Chad, let's look at Denver as the example. Similar situation with Cortland Sutton at wide receiver for the rookie quarterback, potentially. And you have at running back Javonte Williams and Samaje Perine. Beyond that, though, strong offensive line. Marvin Mims Jr., Josh Reynolds has signed there from Detroit. It's a different vibe in Denver than it is in Minnesota, and Sean Payton feeling the heat, the pressure now after what they've done with Russell Wilson. I saw one mock that has Denver trading back in the first round and drafting Bo Nix. Imagine Bo Nix, Zach Wilson, and Jarrett Stidham as your 3-pack. That's a process.
I mean, look,
that's not Houston of last year.
Sean Payton is very specific about his quarterback.
Yes.
So I tend to just agree with whoever they pick because of that. Because I know Sean Payton
but he hasn't
knows
had
exactly
to do that
what
recently.
he wants. No, and I'm not saying it's 100% right. I'm just saying if it is Bo Nix, if they trade back and draft Bo Nix, they got exactly what they wanted, and this is exactly the dude they want to be the franchise quarterback, even if I don't agree with that pick.